What's up, Rovers? For those of you that clicked on this video, know that it is a follow-up to the complete Phrolova guide I uploaded last week. This is a full team building guide for her with all team variants, gearing, and rotations. Due to its depth and length, I've chosen to split it off into its own video. When discussing team tiering, it is assumed Phrolova's signature is equipped. This does not affect comparisons within Havoc teams, but impacts how effective she is in multi-element teams. Certain multi-element teams will vary more so than others in strength as a result. By default, Mono-Havoc teams will always tier higher than multi-element teams for Phrolova due to higher synergy. This video assumes you have a basic understanding of Phrolova's kit, and if you're interested in a full breakdown on everything, please check out my previous video at the top right. It is also assumed all Shorekeepers and Verina shown today will be using variation, and if you don't have this, expect to perform several extra basic attacks to fill their concerto. Phrolova is always considered a main DPS, both because of her excessive raw damage and higher field time requirements. Therefore, all multi-element Phrolova teams are considered dual DPS, since she's usually played alongside another DPS that she, or her third teammate, can buff. This also means multi-element teams have more complicated rotations. If you want a simple Phrolova setup, either stick to Mono-Havoc or go with the healer plus Phrolova setup when picking Rainbow Element third slot. Phrolova works in many teams because Kuro gave her the highest raw damage in the game to account for half of her damage being off-field, which traditionally drops a lot of buffs. While I only list the best teams today, you can honestly play her nearly anywhere and any team, especially if you have her signature. Now, Phrolova does not require intro to perform her rotations at all. While intro is preferred in later rotations to cycle buffs into her, this allows Phrolova to lead the team rotation opener. Regardless, it is preferred to swap in or intro her because it skips to either basic 2 or 3 to save time and acquire volatile notes sooner. In setups where she does not receive an Amplify outro buff that expires on swaps, she will quick swap out during her rotation to set up other units, while letting her swap back in for extra skip aheads to basic 2. In setups where her preceding teammate does not receive an Amplify outro buff that expires on swap, and there are also no echo skill casts left in the rotation, she'll quick swap in to cast Curtain Call, and then quick swap in later again to basic 2-3 plus Forte, so she can generate 2 volatile notes before she intros. These tools will help keep her teammates within 25 seconds whenever possible. If Phrolova's team is rotating too fast, you could stay on her after casting Liberation for Hekati 1-2-3. The second basic can be dodge cancelled once the kick up starts to reach enhanced attack sooner. The enhanced move can be dodge cancelled once the second damage number appears to start another set of basics earlier. This will retain the flower AoE of the third hit. For character builds, it is assumed Phrolova is on 3-piece Dream of the Lost plus a 2-piece set of your choice. 2-piece Havoc is recommended, but it barely matters. She should always be in 4-3-3-1-1 double Havoc 3 costs, because Maestro mode dilutes attack percent bonuses heavily. If you don't use Dream of the Lost 3-piece, you will lose 15% personal DPS. And if you use Havoc attack 3 costs, you will lose 6-7% of her personal DPS. And if you use double attack or a 4-4-1-1-1, you will lose 15-18% of her personal DPS. She does not need ER, as her Liberation costs nothing to cast besides activating Scarlet Coda first. She's an okay battery for the team and does not scale up or down their ER requirements. Now, Phrolova slightly prefers Shorekeeper over Verina due to her own Liberation having a 25-second cooldown and common teammates already having medium-fast rotations. However, Verina allows Phrolova and other Havoc teammates to pass outros back and forth to ensure both units are buffed, since Verina doesn't need her intro, which is something Shorekeeper teams cannot do. Verina teams will close the gap versus Shorekeeper variants in Mono-Havoc and are typically less than 5% weaker. In multi-element teams, unless the third teammate benefits from double intro, Shorekeeper will generally be stronger if used. Note that Shorekeeper and Verina will frequently be weaker options than a third Havoc unit due to team synergy or a strong third sub-DPS in multi-element teams such as Cantarella, Ciaccona, or Phoebe. The trade-off is Shorekeeper and Verina being easy to build, whereas a third sub-DPS requires more resources and often more complicated rotations. Otherwise, unless stated, it is assumed both Shorekeeper and Verina are on 5-piece healer set with 250 ER in combat. Let's start off with Phrolova's most straightforward teams. We'll first look at her premium team to have a reference point. Each team afterwards will be scaling down with the next best replacement. Most Havoc teams will be relatively simple to play, since no Havoc Resonator is particularly slow. Multi-element teams will be covered later in the video. Now the most important Resonator for Phrolova is Cantarella. She brings both skill and Havoc Amplify, as well as 4 Echo skill casts per rotation, translating into 4 enhanced attacks from Hecate during Maestro mode. No other unit buffs Phrolova's output as much. However, Phrolova's signature is still more important than Cantarella, meaning she is skippable if you get it. I would not recommend skipping both Cantarella and Phrolova's signature, especially because the weapon is an amazing general purpose DPS rectifier. Roccia is the next teammate in line, but is very replaceable. While our Magic Box utility item on outro counts as an extra Echo skill for a total of 2, it needs to be cast after her rotation, meaning she loses some value if she outros into Phrolova to reset Maestro mode. Additionally, Roccia's personal damage is somewhat underwhelming, hedging most of her value in a 200 flat attack team buff and grouping. Now, Phrolova herself can group, and already grants herself a large attack % buff, which dilutes Roccia's value. This means the next best option, HRover, who everyone has, is very competitive to Roccia, because nothing Rover does is diluted by Phrolova's team. Massive damage, even as a sub DPS if you have at least S2 on Rover, actually some of the highest in the game, nearly 2 times the output of any other choice in the Havoc team, while providing a general 10% Havoc res shred. Remember that Amplify outros only apply to Phrolova's on-field rotation, which is half her output. Rover's shred buffs everyone for the entirety of the fight, since it has 100% uptime. Other more budget options include Danjin, Taochi, and Lumi. I personally would only recommend Danjin. Both Taochi and Lumi rotate slower than Danjin, deal less damage, and have other issues. Taochi is mechanically slow and difficult to consistently land hits on mobile enemies, whereas Lumi does not benefit from Havoc team synergies while forcing more complicated rotations due to her longer field time, and only 10 seconds outro buff duration. Danjin also has an even shorter variant with half Forte if you have enough VR to cast her Liberation every rotation. Most Havoc units will share similar build profiles. Cantarella is better on Midnight Veil set than Moonlit Clouds, since her personal output is decent. She'll want roughly 130 to 140 ER most of the teams today. If she receives double intro, she can drop down 10 ER. Roccia is also better on Midnight Veil than Moonlit Clouds, but if you only have one Midnight set, put Midnight on your better build Havoc sub DPS of the two. She'll want roughly 125 to 130 ER in most teams today. If she receives double intro, she can drop down 10 ER. HRover's value comes from the 10% red shred and raw damage, and thus should be built for full DPS. Use the Hold the Havoc set with Dreamless. If you use the sub DPS rotation exclusively that barely uses basic attacks, you will need at least 130 ER. For every full basic chain Rover performs today, you can shave off 10 ER. S2 is required for sub DPS to work since we rely on the skill cooldown refresh to generate more Concerto after entering Dark Surge state. Danjin can choose between Midnight Veil or Moonlit Clouds. She needs 130 ER if you want to cast Liberation every rotation. If you're running Moonlit, it is recommended to run the half Forte rotation with Liberation, since you already get plus 10 ER from 2-piece set and Moonlit ruins her personal damage. It's better to cycle quickly to Phrolova. Let's start off with the premium team's rotation first. This setup typically rotates too fast and is recommended to perform a chain of Hecate 1-2-3 before Phrolova casts her outro. We lead with Cantarella's skill for Concerto and +1 Forte, since her passive isn't active until her first intro, so she won't get Concerto from teammates casting Echo skills in the opener. Swap to Phrolova for basic 2-3 plus Forte skill to group enemies together in your first 2 notes. Then skill plus Forte basic afterwards for your next 2 notes. Echo cancel with Hecate for more damage at the same time. Bring Roccia in and skill plus Liberation cancel. The ult has full time stop, but only partial field stop. This allows Phrolova to despawn so we can bring her back in immediately for a basic 2-3. Dodge cancel once it hits and Forte basic to get our last 2 notes. Dodge as soon as it starts and pre-hold heavy to cast Scarlet Coda. Cast Liberation and do 1 set of Hecate 1-2-3 because the team rotates too fast, then outro into Roccia. Wait for her intro plus basic 4 before you cast skill. Dodge cancel once you're in the air and bounce 3 times to fill Concerto. Echo in the third landing before you outro into Cantarella. Cast skill and Liberation cancel. This makes up for her bonus Concerto passive only activating now. Pre-hold heavy so that you immediately go into Mirage mode, then cast skill Flickering Reverie. Spam basic 3 times so you can get 3 shiver stacks to cast Perception Drain. Wait out the entire animation since she's buffed by Roccia's outro. Cast Lorelei and then outro to reset the team into Phrolova. Because each teammate applies an Amplify outro, we no longer do quick swaps on Phrolova after the opener. Intro into Basic 3, Dodge Cancel when it hits and cast Forte Basic for first 2 nodes. Skill Cancel and Forte Basic again for the next 2 nodes. Echo Cancel to do more damage at the same time, then do Basic 1, 2, 3 one more time. Dodge Cancel when BA3 connects so you can do another Forte Basic for the last 2 nodes. Dodge Cancel the Forte Basic while holding heavy to cast Scarlet Coda again. Liberation and do Hecate 1, 2, 3 before outro into Roccia to continue the team. Make sure to cast your Liberation to reset team buffs. Now, Healer in 3rd slot is the budget option for lower investment setups where you don't want to full build a 3rd unit. Because Verina doesn't need intro, this lets Cantarella both outro buff Phrolova and Phrolova's outro buff Cantarella. You just swap off Cantarella right before her rotation ends to do Verina's rotation and reset buffs, closing the gap versus the Shorekeeper variant. Both teams start with Healer, with Verina performing Liberation and Skill plus Echo to activate buffs, where Shorekeeper would just perform Basic 1. This allows us to do a swap into Cantarella to cast Skill and Precharge Concerto. We skip this Cantata swap on the Verina team because we actually want Cantata to be short on Concerto later on, so she can maximize field time buff by Phrolova's outro. Verina will give her second intro anyways. Then both teams will bring in Phrolova for a Basic 2-3. Once BA3 hits, cast Forte Skill to group enemies and get first 2 nodes. Cast Skill into another Forte Basic to get next 2 nodes, and Echo Cancel to deal more damage at the same time. Swap to Healer. Verina actually finishes her entire rotation and intros back into Phrolova, where Shorekeeper only performs in Basic 1, 2, 3. The Shorekeeper variant needs to wait half a second to ensure Phrolova despawns. Then both teams will bring Phrolova in again to perform Basic 3. Dodge Cancel one hit and cast Forte Basic for your last 2 nodes. Dodge Cancel to Forte Basic and hold heavy for Scarlet Coda. Cast Liberation and do one set of Hecate 1, 2, 3 because the team rotates too fast, then outro. Verina teams outro into Cantarella, where you Liberation without casting skill. Pre-hold heavy to go into Mirage mode and do her entire rotation. You'll notice once your Forte detonates, you still add Concerto to outro. This is intentional. Swap to Verina Basic 3, 4, 5 plus Liberation, Skill and Echo to reset all her buffs, then Aerial ×2 to outro a second time into Cantarella. Cast her Echo, and then outro back into Phrolova to reset the team. So long as you don't cast normal skill on Cantarella, she will never have enough Concerto to outro on the Verina team when she casts her Forte Nuke. For the Shorekeeper team, you outro Phrolova instead into Shorekeeper directly. Do your entire rotation, BA 1, 2, 3 plus Heavy and Liberation, then BA 1, 2, 3 plus Skill and Echo again to outro. We bring in Cantarella and actually cast her skill before Liberation. Do your entire rotation like normal and wait out her Forte Nuke, cast Echo and outro to reset the team into Phrolova. Now, Roccia can be substituted for a free-to-play Havoc unit, Rover or Danjin. Both play somewhat similar with minor differences. Danjin directly replaces Roccia in the team and plays non-swap 1, 2, 3 rotation like a premium team, whereas Rover adds one extra swap late in Cantarella's rotation after her Forte Nuke to recast her skill. This allows Rover to always intro with enough Forte to immediately go into Dark Surge state once they cast skill to save time. Rover's team is a little bit sweatier since you need to consistently recast their skill every 12 seconds, but also has higher damage. In fact, Rover here is even better than Verina or Shorekeeper, but requires building a 3rd unit for DPS. Both teams open with Rover or Danjin casting their skill, swap to Cantarella and skill. The Rover variant can cast Cantata Liberation here because it will come back in time since Rover is a better team battery than Danjin. Swap it to Phrolova and do her entire rotation. Basic 2-3 plus Forte skill to group in first 2 nodes. Skill plus Forte basic for next 2 nodes plus Echo cancel to deal more damage at the same time. Do a full basic 1, 2, 3 plus dodge when it hits into another Forte basic to get your last 2 nodes. Dodge cancel to Forte basic again while holding heavy to cast Scarlet Coda. Liberation and outro immediately. Rover team will intro and slam down. cast skill in heavy to enter Dark Surge state. Mash skill to immediately cast Life Taker and get it on cooldown. Do 1 BA 1 2 3 4 5 sequence, then cast Liberation and Dreamless before outro into Cantarella. Pre-hold heavy during your intro animation to immediately go into Mirage mode. Cast skill Flickering Reverie and BA 1 2 3 for 3 Shiver stacks so she can cast Perception Drain Nuke. Swap back to Rover and spam basics until you cast skill again for Forte and Energy. Immediately swap back to Cantarella Liberation, then Echo and outro to reset the team into Phrolova. The Danjin teams will instead intro her after Phrolova's opener, then cast skill ×2 to apply Incinerating Will debuff. Dodge cancel into skill plus basic 2-3, then skill ×3 twice. Then Forte heavy to outro. If you want to save time and have at least one with 30 ER in Danjin, you can fill her to just half Forte instead, and Liberation to pad the missing Concerto before Forte heavy to outro into Cantarella. Do your entire rotation like normal to then reset the team onto Phrolova. Rover should no longer perform their BA 1 2 3 4 5 chain on second rotation onwards, since it becomes too slow when matching skill cooldowns. Now, the strongest free-to-play Phrolova team uses 2 of Havoc Rover Danjin and or Roccia if you have her, because, well, she's barely better than Havoc Rover. AKA, don't pull Roccia for Phrolova if you don't have Cantarella. Roccia's the best in slot support for Rover hypercarry actually, or a situational and sweaty choice for Camellya hypercarry, and barely an improvement even in best case scenario for Phrolova carry. I'll explain the 2 versions with Rover first since they're very similar, then we will look at the Danjin Roccia version afterwards. Now, for either variant that includes Rover, start with their skill cast to pad Forte and Concerto, then swap in Danjin to cast skill, or Roccia to cast skill plus Liberation to attack buff the team. Next, swap in Phrolova for basic 2-3, and a dodge on hit into Forte basic for first 2 notes. Skill cancel plus Forte basic again for next 2 notes, then Echo cancel to deal more damage at the same time. Bring Rover back in and spam basic attacks to pad Concerto for about 1 second until Phrolova despawns. Swap back to her for another basic 2-3 plus dodge on hit into Forte basic for your last 2 notes. Dodge the Forte basic and pre-hold heavy to cast Scarlet Coda. Use Liberation and immediately outro into Rover. Slam down and cast her skill to fill rest of Forte. Heavy to enter Dark Surge and immediately skill Life Taker to put it on cooldown. Cast the full basic 1 2 3 4 5 chain, then Liberation plus Dreamless to outro into your third Havoc character. Danjin will intro and skill ×2 to apply Incinerating Will, then dodge so you can skill again plus basic 2-3 and skill ×3 to reach half Forte. Swap back to Rover, whose skills should be coming off cooldown. Spam basic until you can cast it, then swap back to Danjin Liberation, Forte heavy, and outro to reset the team into Phrolova. If you're using Roccia instead, do your entire rotation like normal when you intro her. The first time you do this, her Liberation will still be on cooldown, letting you skip the part in green to immediately skill into the air. Dodge so you can start bouncing early. Before you come down on the third bounce, swap to Rover mid-air and spam basics until you cast skill off cooldown, then swap back to Roccia to echo and outro back onto Phrolova. Both teams will perform the non-swap Phrolova rotation because they are buffed by Danjin or Roccia's Havoc Amplify outro. So intro into basic 3 plus dodge on hit into Forte basic for first 2 notes. Skill cancel and Forte basic again for next 2 notes. Echo cancel to deal more damage at the same time. Do a full basic 1 2 3 and dodge cancel on hit into Forte basic for your last 2 notes. Dodge this one last time and hold heavy to cast Scarlet Coda. Use Liberation and immediately outro into Havoc Rover to continue like before. For the Danjin Roccia variant, the main difference is we no longer split Roccia's rotation to squeeze in Rover's out of rotation skill cast. We still open the same way with Danjin's skill into Roccia's skill plus Liberation to set up the team attack buff. Swap to Phrolova basic 2-3 with dodge on hit and Forte basic for first 2 notes. Skill cancel into Forte basic again for next 2 notes and echo cancel to deal more damage at the same time. Next, we bring Danjin in to perform a basic 1 2 3 plus skill ×3 while waiting for Phrolova to despawn. Swap her back in for basic 2-3 into one more dodge on hit plus Forte basic for our last 2 notes. Dodge that into pre-hold heavy Scarlet Coda and Liberation to outro into Roccia. As earlier, we no longer need to split our rotation for Rover, so go and skill up into 3 full bounces, casting Echo before she outros onto Danjin. Form skill ×2 to apply Incinerating Will, then dodge cancel into skill skill basic 2-3 plus skill times 3 to fill the rest of her forte. Remember to use Roccia's magic box utility item for grouping and +1 enhanced Ekati cast. Liberation and forte heavy for big damage, then echo before you outro to reset the team. We continue to do Phrolova's non-swap rotation since she is now buffed by an outro amplify. A simple 1-2-3 team for the loop. If you want a more comfortable free-to-play variant that has a lot more rotation time lenience and access to heals, the HRover plus healer setup might be better for your Phrolova. Only Phrolova herself applies amplify outro buffs in this setup, meaning you are free to quick swap during her rotation or the healer to set up teammates and take advantage of her swap in basic 2-3. This is how we will squeeze in Rover's out of rotation skill cast to pad her forte and concerto. Because Phrolova's damage is evenly split 50-50 during her rotation and afterwards, we want to give Rover the gold Stella realm instead. Shorekeeper's teams open with Echo plus Liberation plus skill, then swap to Rover ult plus skill. We want to get Rover's skill on cooldown ASAP, but Shorekeeper's ult is even more important. The only reason why we do Verina's ult after Rover is because it doesn't have true time stop like Shorekeeper's ult and can delay Rover's skill cooldown later in the fight. Now once you bring in Phrolova, do basic 2-3 plus dodge cancel on hit into forte basic for the first 2 notes. Skill cancel into another forte basic for next 2 notes, and echo cancel to deal more damage at the same time. Verina teams will swap her in to do basic 3-4-5 plus aerial times 2 and outro back into Phrolova to skip to basic 3. Shorekeeper teams will ignore this and just do a full basic 1-2-3 on Phrolova. Then both will dodge basic 3 on hit and do one last forte basic for the last 2 notes. Dodge cancel that and hold heavy to cast Scarlet Coda, then use Liberation and immediately outro into Rover. Slam down and cast skill to fill the rest of forte. Heavy to enter Dark Surf state and immediately cast skill Life Taker to put it on cooldown. Cast a full basic 1-2-3-4-5 chain and keep going until 4 to 5 seconds left on skill cooldown, then Liberation plus Dreamless to outro onto your healer. Yes, you actually give Verina intro. Run both healers' entire rotation, being Liberation plus skill echo and aerial times 2 on Verina, or basic 1-2-3 plus Liberation, then another basic 1-2-3 plus heavy and skill and echo on Shorekeeper. You finally bring Phrolova in again, skipping to basic 3. Dodge on hit and follow up with forte basic for your first 2 notes. Immediately swap to Rover to cast skill for concerto and forte. Then swap back to Phrolova and finish her rotation. Basic 1-2-3 if you swap back too fast, into a dodge cancel on hit for another forte basic to get next 2 notes. Skill cancel and forte basic again for last 2 notes, while doing an echo cancel at the same time for more damage. Cast Liberation and outro with optional Hekati 1-2-3 if you're going too fast. For every rotation afterwards, it is recommended to do Rover's BA 1-2-3-4-5 chain only once instead of twice. The next team includes Danjin and Roccia as the 4-star Havoc options. Taochi and Lumi would be even weaker than these variants and will not be shown today. Roccia's included here because she is a non-ideal buffer for Phrolova, having barely better buffs for her than HRover, while having drastically less personal damage and less options for extending rotation for better DPS as needed. TLDR, Roccia healer is equivalent to HRover healer, but requires you to pull Roccia, whereas Danjin healer is slightly weaker than the aforementioned 2 setups. The main difference between Shorekeeper and Verina is being able to trade Havoc Amplify outros back and forth between Phrolova and Danjin or Roccia, which you cannot do with Shorekeeper. This allows Verina to close the gap for similar effectiveness as Shorekeeper variants. Let's look at the Verina variants first. Roccia leads with Liberation plus skill to get our team attack buffs up, then both teams swap to Verina and cast Liberation. Skill and Echo for buffs. Swap it to Phrolova basic 2-3, dodging on hit for forte basic to get your first 2 notes. Skill cancel to another forte basic for next 2 notes. Echo cancel to deal more damage at the same time, then swap to Verina to do basic 3-4-5. You can do aerial times 2 to intro Phrolova and skip directly to basic 3, then dodge on hit and forte basic again for your last 2 notes. Dodge the forte and pre-hold heavy for Scarlet Coda. Cast Liberation and outro into Roccia or Danjin. Do Roccia's entire rotation until the second bounce and swap back to Verina. Do Danjin's skill times 2 if you're using her after intro for Incinerating Will and 1 set of skill basic 2-3 plus skill times 3 to get half forte and cast Liberation before swapping back to Verina. For both, this lets you make the most out of Phrolova's Havoc Amplify outro. Now, do Verina's entire rotation and outro back onto Danjin to skill times 2, then 1 more skill BA 2-3 to skill times 3 to reach full forte and heavy before outro. You can shave off that setup for Danjin and just immediately half forte and outro too, or onto Roccia to Liberation, Echo, and outro. Both teams will pass on their Amplify outro buffs to a non-swap Phrolova rotation reset. For the Shorekeeper variants, both teams will lead with their BA1 for a Forte segment. Swap to your Roccia to buff with Liberation and group with Skill. Danjin will simply swap into Skill to build Forte. Swap into Phrolova basic 2-3 plus Danj into Forte basic for your first 2 notes. Skill cancel into another Forte basic for your next 2 notes. And then Echo cancel to deal more damage at the same time. Bring Danjin back in to Skill for more Forte before both teams bring in Shorekeeper BA1-2-3. Wait half a second before swapping back to Phrolova to make sure she despawns. We skip to basic 2-3, dodging on hit into our last Forte basic for our last 2 notes. Dodge cancel again into a pre-hold heavy to cast Scarlet Coda. Cancel Liberation and perform 1 or 2 full basic chains on Hecate before outro to pad rotation time. Intro into Shorekeeper, perform basic 1-2-3 plus heavy into Liberation, then another BA 1-2-3 plus skill and echo to outro onto Danjin or Roccia. Perform their entire rotation and reset the team into Phrolova non-swap since she's now bought by an Amplify outro. Now the remainder of this video will focus on Phrolova's team synergies outside of the Havoc element. These teams either take advantage of Phrolova's heavy Amplify outro, such as Jiyan or Zani, a special case dual Havoc DPS with Camellya, or pocket Jinhsi nukes because of Cantarella's cord attacks and outro doing dual duty to buff both DPSs, or alternative skill Amplify buffers for Phrolova. We'll also explore variants of these teams for their pros and cons. Now the main reason why Phrolova works so well outside of Havoc teams is her excessively high raw damage is meant to counteract her reliance on team buffs. But this means she's the perfect flex slot in other teams she doesn't even belong in, especially if you're able to take advantage of her animation cancels to speed up her rotation. She's the fastest 5-star main DPS after all, being the first able to do her entire rotation under 10 seconds. Because her team building is almost limitless, we'll instead focus on her non-Havoc teams that still carry a strong synergy. Her heavy Amplify outro can be used to buff Zani and Jiyan, offering a competitive alternative in team building for the former, and is so strong she's actually the new best in slot in the latter. Also, if you look at the current Whimpering Waves tokens, it looks like Augusta might be heavy damage, which means Yuno is most likely directly competing with Phrolova's insane raw damage and heavy Amplify as well. For Jinhsi, Cantarella provides Phrolova with massive skill and Havoc Amplify, while also granting Hecate extra enhanced attacks, while also providing coordinated attacks to charge Jinhsi's forte. Combining the pocket Jinhsi nuke with Phrolova's best in slot buffer results in a powerhouse of a team that's barely behind the best Mono-Havoc setups. In fact, if you replace Cantarella with Verina, you can buff both Jinhsi and Phrolova at the same time, albeit weaker buffs. But the team now becomes fast enough you can run a 2x Jinhsi puke rotation to make up for the loss of Cantarella. Or in another way, Phrolova hits so hard she makes up for not being a skill amplifier with Coord for Jinhsi. For replacement teammates at Phrolova's usual comp, we can still run a dual DPS Camellya too. Now normally Camellya's long field time can be problematic, but Phrolova and her have matching quick swap windows that work if you're using Verina. You can instead also go the other way and play a standard Mono-Havoc comp, but replace Cantarella with Brant if you don't have her, since he's also quick swap friendly, provides skill amplify outro, and deals so much damage himself. This allows you to flex slot the third unit too in the Brant setup, being a healer, Lupa, Roccia, or Havoc Rover. But let's go over the build of Phrolova's multi-element teammates. Jiyan is first up, with Phrolova being his new best in slot team because she deals 3 to 5 times the damage of Mortifi and even 1.5 to 2 times the damage of Jiyan himself. She's also a better battery than Mortifi, allowing Jiyan to drop down to just 120 ER. If the third teammate is Cantarella, Jiyan should stay on the Sierra Gale set. Cantarella should still be 130 plus ER in the Midnight Veil set if possible, otherwise Moonlit Clouds works. If the third teammate is Ciaccona, Jiyan can upgrade to the slightly better Windward Pilgrimage set for extra crit rate. The Cantarella team is slightly stronger because she focuses on buffing Phrolova, who's still stronger than Jiyan. Ciaccona herself should be on Gust of Welkin at roughly 115 to 120 ER. Healer Phrolova Jiyan is also viable, but ever so slightly weaker than the aforementioned two teams. Next up is Zani. Because Phrolova brings no Spectral Frazzle to fuel Zani's kit, you must pair her with a Frazzle generator. This means the third unit must be either Phoebe, Ciaccona, or Spectro Rover. Zani should be on 120 ER Eternal Radiance set, whereas Phoebe has a choice between Eternal Radiance or Moonlit Cloud set. 120 to 125 ER is recommended for Phoebe in this kind of team. Ciaccona is slightly better with Windward Pilgrimage in this team since she has no other arrow unit to buff, but Gust of Welkin also works. Just make sure to select Spectral Frazzle on her ult before you outro. She'll still want 115 to 120 ER like always. Spectro Rover can get by with 110 ER, which is already covered by her S3 plus 20% ER. They can use Healer set, Moonlit Clouds, or Eternal Radiance. For the Jinhsi team, she will still want to use the old Celestial Light set. Your ER is irrelevant on the Cantarella setup since you will only do 1 times puke per rotation, meaning an insane amount of ER would be required. But 100 ER is more than enough to ult every other rotation. If you go Verina instead for the 2 times puke setup, you will want 130 ER on Jinhsi to ult at the same point every time. If you're gonna run the Phrolova Camellya team, Camellya can get by with a standard 115 to 120 ER if you're using Nightmare Crownless, because we feed her a double intro with Verina and Phrolova. She should be on the old Havoc Eclipse set. For alternatives to the traditional Mono-Havoc team, units like Brant, Lupa, Roccia, and HRover can use their usual builds. This means Tide-Breaking Courage at 250 plus ER on Brant, or Molten Rift if you can only manage 200 plus ER. Lupa on Flaming Clawprint at 110 ER if you're willing to cast normal skill times 2, or 120 ER if you don't want to. Roccia still wants 125 to 130 ER and is better on Moonlit Clouds if she's buffing Brant. HRover will want the usual 130 ER on old Havoc set, assuming S2. For each full basic chain Rover performs every rotation, you can subtract 10 ER. Now, Jiyan fits well with Phrolova due to her heavy amplify. This means we have a choice of either Ciaccona or Cantarella in the third slot, aka deciding who the third slot will buff. The Cantarella variant is slightly stronger, but both have extremely similar team rotations, so we'll look at both at the same time. If you have neither, Shorekeeper and Verina are also viable, but slightly weaker options. We'll be looking at the Ciaccona Cantarella variation first. Lead with either Cantarella's skill for Concerto to account for a passive not being active, or Ciaccona's skill plus Echo plus Liberation to also pad Concerto and set up her arrow team buffs and immediately start applying arrow erosion. Then both teams will swap into Phrolova basic 2-3 and dodge cancel on hit to do a Forte basic for first 2 notes. Skill cancel into another Forte basic for another 2 notes. Echo cancel at the same time to deal more damage. Swap to Jiyan and cast the skill for Concerto and damage. If you're on Sierra Gale's old Beringal, cast it here to set up buffs. Swap back to Phrolova after she despawns to continue from basic 2-3 and dodge on last hit into another Forte basic for your last 2 notes. Dodge cancel down to a pre-ult heavy Scarlet Coda, then Liberation and outro into Jiyan. Immediately cast Liberation and start DPSing. Basic once with the skill cancel right as his foot lands back on the ground, then either spam basics until skill is available again, or alternate more dodge cancels when his foot lands on the ground for the double dragon tech. Continue using Qinglong basics after second skill cast until this mode ends, then outro onto either Cantarella or Ciaccona. Both complete their entire rotation to reset the team into Phrolova. This means Cantarella casts skill into Liberation with the pre-ult heavy to enter Mirage mode. Cast skill Flickering Reverie, then basic 1-2-3 for 3 shiver stacks and cast her Forte nuke. Cast Echo and outro. Ciaccona will instead cast Fleur de Lis as she intros to protect her basic 3-4 chain for 2 Forte stacks. Do a jump cancel into Aerial 1-2 and land your basic 4 for your third Forte. Dodge cancel into a heavy quadruple downbeat, then Liberation when it fires to outro and reset. Cantarella teams will have to do non-swap Phrolova onwards because she's outro amplified buffed, but Ciaccona variants can swap off during her echo cancel to cast skill for energy, concerto, and buffs, before swapping back into a Phrolova basic 2. Next up is the Healer Jiyan Phrolova variant. Regardless of healer choice will open with them. Verina casts Liberation and Skill plus Echo, whereas Shorekeeper starts with basic 1-2-3 plus Liberation, then another basic 1-2-3 plus Heavy. Both teams will swap to Phrolova basic 2-3 and dodge cancel on hit to do a Forte basic for first 2 notes. Skill cancel into another Forte basic for another 2 notes. Echo cancel at the same time to do more damage. Swap back to your healer and finish their rotation. Verina will basic 3-4-5 plus Aerial times 2 to outro, whereas Shorekeeper will do one more basic 1-2-3 plus Heavy, Skill and Echo to outro. Both teams bring Phrolova in again. Intro into her basic 3, dodge on last hit into another Forte basic for your last 2 notes. Dodge cancel then into a pre-hold heavy Scarlet Coda, then Liberation and outro into Jiyan. Immediately cast Liberation and start DPSing, basic once with a skill cancel right as his foot lands on the ground. Then either spam basics until skill is available again, or alternate more dodge cancels when his foot lands on the ground for the double dragon attack. Continue using Xinglong basics after second skill cast until this mode ends. Then outro directly back onto your healer for another simple 1-2-3 rotation. We actually intro Verina on this team because there isn't a reason to double intro anymore. Phrolova isn't amplify outro buff, so we can swap Jiyan in for an extra skill cast to pad concerto and energy, while also swapping back to Phrolova's basic 2. The Verina team is roughly 2 to 3 seconds faster every rotation and actually has slightly higher overall DPS. Now, similar to Jiyan, Zani also benefits from Phrolova's heavy amplify outro. However, team building is more restricted this time since Zani requires a fragile teammate to work properly. This means we need to pick between Phoebe, Ciaccona, and Spectro Rover for the third slot. Phoebe is the best choice, followed by Ciaccona. Rover is clunky and prone to missing, but works if needed. Please note, this is an updated Zani Phoebe Phrolova rotation, different from the one in my original Phrolova guide. It is 1 to 2 seconds faster and has slightly higher DPS. The main benefit is 3 less quick swaps, but it is more dependent on correctly performing dodge cancels. For the Phoebe variant, lead with her Confession skill into Echo plus Liberation cancel. Cast Ring skill afterwards and immediately dodge cancel forwards into it to perform Camellya star basic 1-2-3. Dodge cancel basic 3 when it begins into a pre-hold heavy for Star Flash. Swap to Zani as soon as Star Flash begins and cast skill plus basics 3, shield bash to build Forte. Mash swap back to Phoebe until the game lets you so that you can do another Camellya star basic 1-2-3. Dodge BA3 again into a second Star Flash. Fill the missing concerto with another basic 1-2-3 or a perfect dodge, then outro into Phrolova. She will skip to basic 3, dodge on hit and forte basic for your first 2 notes. Skill cancel into another forte basic for your next 2 notes. Then echo cancel to deal more damage at the same time. Immediately swap to Zani to skill shield bash and basic 3 again to fill rest of your forte, then tap cast forte skill to enter sunburst mode. Wait half a second for the skill icon to change back to normal shield so you can swap out to Phrolova for a basic 2-3 plus dodge on hit into forte basic for your last 2 nodes. Pre-hold heavy to immediately cast Scarlet Coda and Liberation plus outro into Zani. Immediately cast her Liberation and start DPSing. Stay on Zani the entire time since she's buffed by Phrolova's heavy amplify and spam 2 heavy slash chains. Then cast second Liberation to outro back onto Phoebe. Cast her Echo during intro animation for another Hecate enhanced attack, then hold skill Confession into a Liberation cancel. Immediately cast Ring skill and dodge into it. Do the entire Camellya star basic 1-2-3 plus dodge into Star Flash chain twice, then outro into Phrolova to finish the rotation and continue the team. The Ciaccona variant is notably faster than Phoebe's longer rotation, however this team still has lower DPS since Ciaccona on a Franzel team no longer buffs anyone with their Arrow Sylphs or Arrow Erosion Amplify outro. Lead with Ciaccona's skill and Echo into Liberation to pad Concerto and picking Spectral Frazzle on the left. Swap it to Phrolova's basic 2-3 for Forte skill to group enemies in first 2 notes. Then skill into another Forte basic with an Echo cancel for 2 more notes. Swap into Zani's skill plus basic 3 shield bash and wait about a second for Phrolova to despawn. Swap back into her basic 2-3, then dodge on hit into Forte basic for your last 2 notes. Dodge cancel the Forte into a heavy Scarlet Coda, then cast Liberation and immediately outro into Zani. Cast her Echo and Forte skill, waiting out the entire animation for plus 10 blades. Cast Liberation and do 2 full heavy slash chains before casting second Liberation to outro back onto Ciaccona. Do your entire rotation in one go, intro with Flow Delete to protect her basic 3-4, then jump cancel into aerial 1-2 so you can do another basic 4. Skill cancel once basic 4 begins into a pre-hold heavy to dump your quadruple downbeat. Then cast Liberation and pick Frazzle before outro into Phrolova. Basic 3 plus dodge on hit into a Forte basic for your first 2 notes, followed by skill cancel into another Forte basic and Echo cancel for another 2 notes. Swap to Zani to skill plus basic 3 shield bash to fill half Forte, while waiting for Phrolova to despawn. After half a second, swap back to her for basic 2-3 plus Forte basic for your last 2 notes, then Scarlet Coda and Liberation to Zani to continue the team. Now, I personally would not recommend the Spectro Rover variant as it's somewhat weak. We barely get enough blaze for Zani's liberation, and the Amplify outro from Phrolova prevents Quick Swap Rover to give more blaze or precharge Concerto during Zani's Nightfall casts. Lead with Rover's BA1 into liberation to pad Forte. Echo plus pre-hold heavy to 2x enhance basics to fill half Forte, and skill plus BA to dump it. Always dodge counter on Rover when you can to skip the heavy windup. Swap to Phrolova BA23 plus Forte skill to group enemies in first 2 nodes. Then skill into another Forte basic with an echo cancel for 2 more nodes. Swap it to Zani skill plus BA3 shield bash to fill half Forte, then swap back to Rover for a heavy plus enhanced basic times 2 so you can skill one last time to outro into Phrolova. Cast your basic 3, then dodge on hit into Forte basic for your last 2 nodes. Dodge cancel to Forte into a heavy Scarlet Coda, then cast Liberation and immediately outro into Zani. Cast your Echo and Forte skill, waiting out the entire animation for a plus 10 blaze. Cast Liberation and do 2 full heavy slash chains before casting second Liberation to outro back onto Spectro Rover. Cast Echo during intro, immediately Forte's skill, Liberation on the follow-up basic, and immediately pass over swap Phrolova to trigger Curtain Call, while casting skill plus BA3 shield bash on Zani. Swap back to Rover for pre-hold heavy plus enhanced basic times 2 for Forte while waiting for Phrolova to despawn. Bring her in for basic 2-3 for Forte skill to group enemies plus first 2 nodes. Then skill plus Forte basic for next 2 nodes into an Echo cancel. Swap back to Rover to cast skill and outro into Phrolova. Get the last 2 nodes with BA3 plus Forte basic, then Scarlet Coda and Liberation to outro into Zani and continue the team. Now, Jinhsi Phrolova is an odd case. In the best in slot scenario, Cantarella is the best choice because she triple dips her synergy. She provides ideal buffs for Phrolova while also granting 4 enhanced attacks to Hecate, while also easily charging Jinhsi's Forte to full. However, she's slow enough that we only get 1 times Jinhsi Puke per rotation. But because the synergy is so high, it's still stronger than a Verina 2 times Jinhsi Puke alternative setup for the same team. I believe this is the first time a sub DPS has had triple synergy for a team setup besides Lupa, who's obviously made for triple fusion anyways. I would not recommend playing Jojo on this team since she's slow enough she forces 1 times Jinhsi Puke, has less buffs for Phrolova anyways, and also less enhanced attacks for Hecate. Now, the strongest version of Jinhsi Phrolova is with Cantarella. We lead with Cantarella's skill to bad Concerto, then swap into Phrolova basic 2-3 for Forte skill to group enemies. This is a 2+4 strat for note stacking, because we want to get Jinhsi's outro up ASAP to build her Forte. Do a Jinhsi jump cancel setup, BA234 into skill plus Liberation, then skill for energy, while mashing jump during a BA1234 before the puke. Outro into Cantarella, skilling again before Liberation. Pre-hold heavy to enter Mirage mode and cast skill Flickering Reverie. Do BA123 for 3 shiver stacks and wait out your Perception Drain nuke before casting Echo to outro into Phrolova. Get the remaining 4 nodes via intro plus BA3 into a dodge on hit for a Forte basic. Immediately skill cancel into another Forte basic followed by an Echo cancel and pre-hold heavy for Scarlet Coda. Cast Liberation and do 1 set of Hecate 123 to slow the team down before outro. Intro Jinhsi and cast skill into Liberation. Echo into BA123 plus skill Crescent Divinity, then BA4 plus Puke. Outro into Cantarella to do her entire rotation, then cycle into Phrolova to finish. A simple 1-2-3 setup. The Verina variant focuses on going faster to manage a 2 times Jinhsi Puke setup while aligning Jinhsi's 12 to 13 seconds incarnation cooldowns with Phrolova quick swaps to charge nodes faster. We lead with Verina Liberation and skill in Echo to immediately set up buffs and stack Forte. Swap it to Jinhsi for a jump cancel setup, BA234 into skill plus Liberation, then skill for energy while mashing jump during BA1234 before the puke. Intro Phrolova into a BA3 plus dodge on hit with a Forte basic for your first 2 nodes. Swap it to Verina to do BA345 and aerial times 2 while Phrolova despawns. Intro Phrolova again for another BA3 plus dodge on hit into Forte basic for the next 2 nodes. Skill cancel into Forte basic again for your last 2 nodes. Echo cancel this and pre-hold heavy for Scarlet Coda into Liberation and immediately outro back into Jinhsi. Echo plus Incarnation skill, then BA123 plus Crescent Divinity, then BA4 plus Puke to outro into Verina. Yes, Verina. Skill and Echo to trigger Phrolova's last enhanced attack, then Liberation before swapping into Curtain Call. Swap back to Verina and Aerial ×2 to outrun to Jinhsi. Plunge down to cast Incarnation skill when it comes off cooldown, then swap to Phrolova to cast BA-2-3 and a Forte skill to group enemies up. Swap back to Jinhsi and Liberation and BA-1-2-3 plus Crescent Divinity before BA-4 plus top half puking the grouped enemies from Phrolova earlier. Outrun to Phrolova, finish your rotation, and then continue the team into Jinhsi's bottom half puke. Now, the Camellya Phrolova setup is a bit special because it only works with Verina depending on the double intro to get Camellya's buffs up, and specific quick swap windows between the two Havoc DPS to allow both to shine. We lead with Verina's Liberation, then a skill and Echo to set up buffs and pad Forte. Swap to Phrolova basic 2-3 and dodge cancel on hit to do a Forte basic for your first 2 nodes. Skill cancel into another Forte basic for another 2 nodes. Echo cancel at the same time to do more damage. Swap back to Verina and BA-345 plus Aerial ×2 to outro into Camellya. Slam down and pre-hold a heavy. Swap to Phrolova BA-2-3 plus Forte skill to group enemies, then swap to Camellya to hit all of them with her white hair BA-4 hold. As soon as BA-5 starts, which is the slam marked by a red glint on the sword, swap back to Phrolova and slam down while holding heavy for Scarlet Coda. Cast Liberation and outro back onto Camellya. Cast Echo here. If you're on normal crownless, you'll have to slam down. Nightmare crownless can cast it in air. Dodge cancel into a skill plus Liberation, then Ephemeral to enter budding mode. Hold the BA-1-2-3-4 to spin, then skill down before outro. Cast Streamless here if you're using it. We reset into Phrolova, leading BA-3 into dodge cancel on hit plus Forte basic for your first 2 nodes, skill cancel plus Forte basic for another 2 nodes, then Echo cancel for more damage, while swapping to Verina basic 345 plus Liberation. Skill and Echo with Aerial ×2 to intro Camellya. Set up a pre-hold heavy again while bringing in Phrolova to BA-2-3 plus Forte skill to group and get your last 2 nodes while Camellya burns her pistols down. Swap to Phrolova during the slam so she can Scarlet Coda and ult to outro into Camellya and continue the team. Now, if you go in the other direction and instead replace Cantarella with another sub DPS instead of main DPS, our best alternative would be Brant, another skill amplifier that is nearly as fast as Cantarella, but much better quick swap windows and much higher personal damage. This allows us to somewhat close the gap from lacking Cantarella, but it also means our third unit can be anybody who works with Brant, like a healer, Lupa, Roccia, or HRover. Roccia is actually pretty viable here since Phrolova buffs her, her magic box utility counts as an extra Hecate enhanced attack, and the grouping makes Brant Anchor a lot more consistent. I wouldn't use Sanhua here because the team already rotates way too fast and is a downgrade over a healer buffing both units. Additionally, Brant is both stronger than Cantarella as a baseline and gains more from his signature than she does with hers. Now, the healer variant is the easiest to play, and if anything, might even go too fast. Both rotations are similar, so if you're fast enough on Verina, you'll probably get better performance out of the Shorekeeper version instead. Alternatively, the Verina team can extend Phrolova's rotation for 1 extra BA-1-2-3 plus Forte basic chain if you're confident, as it has pretty good damage. Both teams want to open with a swap into Phrolova. Verina teams achieve this with Liberation plus skill, whereas Shorekeeper teams will cast Brant skill to pad as Forte and Concerto since the Shorekeeper team is slower. Quickly swap into Phrolova basic 2-3 and dodge cancel on hit to do a Forte basic for first 2 nodes. Skill cancel into another Forte basic for another 2 nodes. Echo cancel at the same time to do more damage. Both teams will swap to their healers, with Verina doing basic 3-4-5 and Shorekeeper doing basic 1-2-3 Liberation. Our goal is to push ahead our healer rotation without outro while letting Phrolova despawn so we can swap back into her basic 2-3. Dodge on hit plus Forte basic to get our last 2 nodes. Pre-hold heavy for Scarlet Coda and cast Liberation, outroing instantly on both teams. Verina team outros into Brant, casting his Liberation and tapping all of his aerials until basic 4 when you come down to the ground. Swap to Verina and Echo for Hecate's enhanced attack and aerial ×2 to outro back into Brant. Immediately anchor and reset the team into Phrolova. The Shorekeeper variant will instead outro the Phrolova opener into Shorekeeper directly. Finish your rotation with BA-1-2-3 plus heavy, then skill and Echo to outro into Brant. Do Brant's entire rotation with an aerial 2-charge hold. When aerial 3 comes close to the ground, cast Echo for Hecate's enhanced attack and immediately dodge cancel. Then cast Forte and outro when it hits to reset the team into Phrolova. Both teams use Brant to apply an amplify outro to Phrolova, so stay on her and do the entire rotation. Then outro onto Brant for Verina team
teams, then swap back to Verina right before he anchors like before, whereas the Shorekeeper teams outro Phrolova back into SK herself. Did you know Phrolova plays with the Mono Fusion team really well? Just replace Changli with her for a faster, higher damage, actual main DPS. It's basically a minimal swap team since Phrolova's fast rotation means you only need to swap Brant and Lupa together. This is fine because unlike Changli, Phrolova doesn't outro amplify Lupa. We open with Brant's skill to pad Forte and swap into Phrolova basic 2-3 and dodge cancel on hit to do a Forte basic for first 2 nodes. Skill cancel into another Forte basic for another 2 nodes. Echo cancel at the same time to do more damage. Swap to Lupa to ground basic 2-3. As soon as she unbends her limbo, swap back to Phrolova basic 2-3. Dodge on hit plus Forte basic to get our last 2 nodes. Reeled heavy for Scarlet Coda and cast Liberation, outroing onto Lupa. Cast her Echo for Akati enhanced attack and Liberation to activate our pack hunt and glory buffs for Brant. Use Foe Breaker into Aerial 1-2 and Fire Strike, swapping off the instant to air spears form to Brant. Do an Aerial 1 flip and Q another Aerial 1 before coming back to Lupa in time for Wolf's Claw to get her second Forte. Cast her Forte Climax and outro cancel as early as you can onto Brant. Cast his Liberation once her Forte explodes and hold Aerial 2 charge. When you come down for Aerial 3, cast Echo for Akati's enhanced attack and immediately dodge cancel. Then cast Forte and outro when it hits to reset the team into Phrolova. She now has Brant's skill amplify buff on her, so stay on her and do the entire rotation, before enhance introing onto Lupa to reapply the fusion buffs with Liberation. Remember to quick swap her Fire Strike with Brant. The Roccia version of this team is surprisingly strong, because not only does Roccia provide the extra Akati enhanced attack, but she also groups enemies together to make Brant anchor extremely reliable while also being buffed by Phrolova's outro. Remember, Roccia also amplifies basic damage for Brant. We lead with Brant's skill to pad Forte and swap it to Phrolova basic 2-3 and dodge cancel and hit to do a Forte basic for first 2 nodes. Skill cancel into another Forte basic for another 2 nodes. Echo cancel at the same time to do more damage. Swap to Roccia Liberation. It has full time stop, but only partial field stop, while allowing Phrolova to despawn before the time stop ends. We can now bring Phrolova back in for basic 2-3, dodge on hit plus Forte basic to get our last 2 nodes. Pre-hold heavy for Scarlet Coda and cast Liberation, outroing onto Roccia. Let basic 4 go through, then skill plus dodge so he can early bounce 3 times with Real Fantasy. Cast Echo before you outro for Hecate. Intro Brant and Liberation. Hold Aerial 2 charge for Forte, and when you come down for Aerial 3, cast Roccia's Magic Box item and Echo for 2 of Hecate's enhanced attacks and then immediately dodge cancel. Cast Forte and outro when it hits to reset the team into Phrolova. She now has Brant's skill amplify buff on her, so stay on her and do the entire rotation before outroing into Roccia to Liberation and reset team buffs. No more quick swap needed after opener, it's just a simple 1-2-3. HRover team is still decently strong with a 10% Havoc Red Shred for herself and Phrolova on top of Brant's skill amplify outro. We lead with Rover's skill to pad Forte and swap into Phrolova basic 2-3 and dodge cancel on hit to do a Forte basic for first 2 nodes. Skill cancel into another Forte basic for another 2 nodes. Echo cancel at the same time to do more damage. Swap to Brant and mash skill. Then we want to mash swap back to Phrolova so she doesn't despawn since Brant puts himself in the air. This means she'll be forced to do a full basic 1-2-3 combo manually. Dodge on hit plus Forte basic to get our last 2 nodes. Pre-hold heavy for Scarlet Coda and immediately cast Liberation, outroing onto HRover. Cast skill and pre-hold heavy to enter Dark Surge state. Spam skill to animation cancel with Life Taker, then do a few basic pokes to get enough Concerto before Liberation and Dreamless to outro. Brant intros and then cast Liberation. Hold Aerial 2 charge for Forte, and when you come down for Aerial 3, cast Echo for Hekate's enhanced attack, and immediately dodge cancel. Cast Forte and swap to Rover to cast skill when it comes off cooldown, then swap back to Brant and poke the enemy to outro and reset the team into Phrolova. No more quick swapping needed after opener, just a simple 1-2-3. And that's it for the Phrolova team building guide. Thank you so much for watching through this entire video. I hope this has been useful for setting up and playing our teams. As a reminder, all spreadsheets documenting my testing can be found in the description and pinned comment. If you need a refresh on Phrolova herself, do feel free to check out our complete guide down there too. Cheers! If this is your first time watching, feel free to leave a like or better yet subscribe. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. Stick around if you want to see interesting videos, so I won't miss out on any of that, do you? That'll be it for this one. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you all next time.